Okay, now what we need to do is address this neck, and we need to think about it as somewhat of a layer. Even though we're talking about flat design, we still may want to make this a different color, and we also need to think about, just like we dress ourselves, our skin is below our shirt line, so we don't necessarily have to be quite as careful with the neck as we do with some other shapes that are kind of exposed. Just kind of like our head, we could be a little bit more extreme with the head because I knew that the hair was going to cover it up. So in any event, what we're going to do is make a new layer and make sure that that new layer is made, because then that'll screw things up if you do it on another layer. So I'm going to put it below the face layer because I really want it to be behind. And we could just use the polygon lasso tool here because it's reasonably kind of straightforward, but I do have a little curve here, so, and I want to use the pen tool a little bit more, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, another thing, kind of a quirky thing about the paths, and this is going to mess you up so that you need to take special note of this, is that I'm going to end up drawing on this same path again. And then when I want to fill it, it's going to fill whatever I had on this other path, which is not what I want. So I want to make a new path. And this is going to be my neck path. Or I can just delete the other ones if I know I'm not going to need to use it anymore. So I'm going to use the pen tool here. And I can just really just click, click, click without having to pull any direction lines, except right here. So I'm going to hold Alt down, left click, drag up, just to get that little curve of the neck, and Alt left click and drag. And so now I have this new path, and I'm going to go back to my layers, and I'm going to make that a shape. But first I want to make sure that my color is what I want it to be. And so I think this was my face color, so I'm going to go a shade darker and then go to shape, and there it is. Now the reason why I'm seeing through that is because my face layer is got low opacity. So if I do that, now I've got my neck and it's a slightly different color, and you can debate whether that's a good color or not. But so there we are again. We're going to reduce the opacity so I can see through for the shirt. And again, I want to make a new layer, but this one's going to be above the neck. Doesn't really make any difference whether it's above the face or not, but above the neck. And then I'm going to do the undershirt here to begin with. And again, I'm going to go to path, and I'm going to make a new layer, or throw these other ones away, one or the other. And so I'll come here and make, oops, didn't want to do that. I'm going to make just this shirt here. Come up. And again, I don't have to be perfect. I'm going to make this come a little shorter here. And I can kind of round that off. Just with a rectangle. And let's choose a color, and I'll do a blue, make it fill. And again, we're going to do that same kind of thing here. We're going to reduce the opacity so we can see through it, make a new layer, and then I'm going to again make a new path layer, and click and drag, Alt, or click and drag, then Alt. Let's see, what are we going to do here? Alt, click and drag. Just click, Alt, click and drag. And my last one, I needed to hold Alt down. That makes that a corner. And then I'm going to go back again on that new layer, and I'm going to make this maybe just a shade lighter, and go to shape. And then do it again. come up, go to paths, make a new path, pen tool here, left click and drag, left click and drag, Alt, left click and drag, left click and or Alt, left click and drag, left click and drag, Alt, left click and drag, and then Alt click. And again, I'll shape, and then I'll go back to my layers and I'll turn on all the opacity of all these layers. And it's kind of ugly, but you get the idea. So we've got all that, and one of the final things we're going to do then is it just kind of depends upon you. Whether, first of all, we don't necessarily need the background drawing, so you can kind of see what's going on here. I probably could have done a little bit better job around the collar, but then what we do, and typically like in cartoons, is we put a stroke around it. So I can go to the face and I can double click out here and go to the layer styles, or I can come up here to layer and layer styles right here, and then I can go to stroke. I'm going to do it right here, and I can change the color of the stroke, and I can change the thickness of the stroke. Now you can do it a couple different ways. I mean, this is a kind of a choice of yours. Sometimes you put a black stroke. Sometimes the artist will do this. They'll come and take this color, but then they'll make it just a shade darker. And sometimes that's a popular way of doing things. And I would come down here, put a stroke on this one, and this is where we need to really make sure that we've got our layers correct. Otherwise they're going to kind of bleed out, and you can see this kind of bleeding out right here. The stroke is a little bit bigger than the shape. It probably is not going to make a whole lot of difference once we put a stroke around the shirt. So I can click here, go to stroke. Now another way of doing this is I can right click, copy layer style, and then I can come down on the next layer, right click, and then paste layer style, and now I know it's exactly the same size stroke and whatever other effects that else I make. So then we can come up here, and I'm going to choose stroke, but I like this idea of making it just a shade darker. And there we have a reasonable facsimile of a cartoon character. So hopefully this is helpful. Spend a little bit of time with the pen tool, and also you may need to spend a little bit of time looking at some other YouTube videos. Well, if you have questions, give me a call. Okay, the last thing we need to address, and this is kind of ugly here, I do admit that. I may want to work on that a bit. But I ask you to turn it into a PNG with a transparent background. So what I need to do is turn off the background layer. Now I have this transparent. I could select all of these other layers here, and then I can center it up a little bit, or I could hit Control T and resize. But that may or may not be effective if I hit Control T, which is transform. That one, I guess, is everything's coming together. But sometimes in some programs, maybe they may transform using a different point of origin and not a collectively centered point of origin. So you may want to be careful. If that's the case, you may want to just flatten all the layers. But it's always good to save layers, and so you want to save this as a Photoshop document. And so if we did that, we go to File, Save As, and notice that it's set up PDF right now, but we want a PSD, which is the Photoshop's native document. And I'll just go ahead and search cartoon and save it. And yes, we want to maximize compatibility. But then what I want to do is actually, when you turn it in, is go to Save As, and you can change this as a PNG. And so that's going to save the transparency. And so if you ever wanted to lay this onto a web page and you wanted to put it on top of something else, you wouldn't have this big white background that a JPEG would have. So, all right, good luck. Have fun.